I've said it before and I'll say it again, that when it comes to quote-unquote goth characters, there really aren't many goth characters in video games. However, there are quite a few gothic inclined characters, and that's what today's video is going to be about. Now, I'm pretty sure that those of you who are familiar with my channel won't be surprised to learn that I tend to be drawn to gothic or macabre type characters, and for this list, I'm going to be basing my choices off the character's design, personality, and overall lasting impression as a gothic character as a whole. Remember guys, these are just my own personal favorites. So with that out of the way, here are my top 10 favorite gothic characters in video games. Let's begin. The Castlevania series is like the pinnacle of gothic themes in video games, and they naturally featured quite a few gothic and macabre styled characters. However, I decided to go with Chenoa. Chenoa made her debut appearance in Castlevania Order of Ecclesia, released for the Nintendo DS, and she was the first leading female protagonist in the Castlevania series. When I first saw her official artwork, I immediately fell in love with her character design. It has a very nice, elegant gothic warrior aesthetic, and I really liked her black and dark purple color theme, as it's such a classic romantic gothic staple. However, her design in Castlevania Judgment was, I was not a big fan of it. Anyway, I did find her personality to be a bit on the more robotic side of things, but it made sense for her story as she ended up losing her emotions and memories in the beginning of the game, and she ends up regaining them later in her adventure. But other than that, there really isn't a whole lot to say about her personality other than being your typical noble hero. Overall, I like Chenoa, and I really love her character design, and I'm hoping that she'll make a return in future Castlevania games. Bullet Witch was a game that was only released on the Xbox 360 back in 2012, and the main protagonist was a young girl named Alicia. Naturally, I was already digging her design. It's a very nice modern gothic fantasy style witch outfit that manages to look both sexy and stylish all at the same time. I like her aloof but caring personality, but I do have to admit that the dialogue in this game was laugh out loud awful. I mean, it's not horrendous as I've heard far worse, but it's still pretty bad. But thankfully, Alicia herself was a pretty reserved character, and she doesn't really say a whole lot, so her character was spared from the cheesy dialogue. I also have to admit that Alicia is a pretty stereotypical gothic type character when it came to her overall presentation. And for anyone who knows me and how I am when it comes to lazy gothic stereotypes, you'll know that I'm not the biggest fan of it. But in Alicia's case, I actually didn't mind it, as there was just something about her character that made it work for me. From what I've seen and read about this game, it's really not that surprising why it didn't go anywhere, and it's such a shame because the premise of it was interesting, but unfortunately, it suffered from poor execution. But while the game faded into obscurity, I'm not afraid to admit that Alicia herself was a pretty neat character, and I would love to see her come back someday. Zwei was one of the new characters who was introduced in Soul Calibur 5, and while I couldn't have cared less for most of the new characters in the game, Zwei was pretty much the only new character I actually liked. He was pretty okay. His design looks pretty awesome, though like I've said before, I much prefer his two-player costume way more than his default costume, as it just screams gothic macabre, and looks very Castlevania-ish. His overall aesthetic was pretty neat for a gothic male character design. His personality was a little bit too one-note for my liking, but to be fair, all the new characters suffer from this because of the rushed game development. Though I'm willing to give Zwei some positive props, as they didn't give him a stereotypical brooding, I hate the world personality that these kind of characters tend to get stuck with. And I found myself enjoying his level-headed yet somewhat cocky personality. I'm still not a big fan of his overall fighting style, as I still think it would have been way cooler if he just turned into a werewolf instead of summoning this thing. But at the very least, I can admit that his playstyle is pretty fun when you learn how his fighting style works. In the end, while Soul Calibur 5 is still a disappointment of a Soul Calibur game in my opinion as a longtime Soul Calibur fan, I can easily say that I'm grateful we got a gothic male character like Zwei, and he's definitely one of my favorites. Now at first glance, when looking at this lovable white-haired hunky demon, one doesn't think of him as a Gothic design. Well, when looking at his Devil May Cry 3 look anyway, which is easily his most iconic look, and I can agree with that. However, people seem to forget about his designs from the first 2 Devil May Cry games, where he definitely took on a more Gothic looking aesthetic. His design seems to be a combination of Gothic and Western, especially with his look in Devil May Cry 4. For a male Gothic tone design, he looked great, though his Devil May Cry 1 look will always be my most favorite. Anyway, Dante's character is brimming with personality, and when you play the games in chronological order, you can see how his character develops from a hard-headed, fun-loving, rebellious teenager from Devil May Cry 3, all the way up to a serious, no-nonsense warrior with a sense of humor in Devil May Cry 2. When you play the games or watch the cutscenes in the correct order, it's pretty interesting to see how much his character changes as the games went on. Ignoring this, Dante's original presentation was pretty solid in my book, and it's not surprising why he's so beloved by many, and he turned out to be a pretty neat Gothic type character, who is pretty different from the norm when it comes to these kinds of characters, and I can't complain about that at all. I was both surprised and not surprised that the Twisted Metal series had a Gothic character, and when I first learned this, I was pretty skeptical. Raven was a character who made her first and only appearance in Twisted Metal Black, released for the PlayStation 2. While her design looks a bit too stereotypical for my taste, I found myself kind of liking it despite it being very cliche. The thing that really made me like her was her personality and her backstory. At first glance, she looks like she may have an obnoxious, brooding attitude, but that's not the case at all. In fact, she's one of the sanest characters in the whole series, and that really says a lot when you think about it in a game like this, that's filled with murderous psychopaths and serial killers. In her story, she's a Gothic teenager who was sent to an insane asylum by her parents when they thought that she killed her best friend, but in reality, it was actually a group of 2 bullies who picked on her and her friend that killed her, and got away with it. And they only got picked on because they looked Gothic. Raven was really close with her best friend, and angered at the bullies who tormented them both, got away with the murder, and didn't even feel remorse for what they did. She vows to avenge her best friend's death and make them pay. She isn't necessarily a saint, as revenge is not always the answer, but after going through an event like that, it's understandable why she'd want to get revenge in the context of the Twisted Metal universe. Twisted Metal is way more gameplay oriented over story, but I appreciate that they had Raven be a more sympathetic character, which is always a nice thing to see for Gothic characters. It was only a matter of time before the Legend of Zelda series introduced a Gothic character, and we got that character in the form of Midna, a character who made her debut appearance in The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, released for the GameCube. Now, if I had to be honest, the whole art direction for Twilight Princess definitely felt more darker and Gothic compared to the games before and after it, and as a Gothic-minded individual myself, I absolutely loved it. Midna was a pretty interesting but complex character. Her imp design was just so creepy but adorable, and her true Twilight form looked so decadently dark and elegant. When I first saw her true form at the end of the game when I was a kid, I was completely mesmerized by it. It was just that beautiful, in my opinion. Now, I'm gonna admit that it took a while for Midna's personality to grow on me, because in the beginning of Twilight Princess, she was pretty condescending and, well, she was kind of a bitch. But as the game went on, and she goes through character growth and learns not to be so selfish, and develops some compassion, she became pretty likable. Well, for me anyway, which was good because I was already sold on her design. For Zelda's prominent Gothic character, Midna was awesome, and she was definitely a memorable character. I was not surprised that a game like Brutal Legend featured a Gothic character, as the game was centered around metal and the subgenres of that music genre. Ophelia was the quote-unquote goth character in the game, and I only say quote because honestly, there's a difference between goth and Gothic. And well, Ophelia's base design looks more metalhead than Gothic, if I had to be honest. However, in the middle of the game, when Ophelia dives into the sea of black tears and brings forth her darker side, otherwise known as Drowned Ophelia, she definitely looks like a macabre Gothic enchantress. Hell, she even drives around in a macabre-styled hot rod in the design of a hearse. I mean, you can't get any more Gothic than that. The overall thing I like about Drowned Ophelia is her presentation. She's voiced by the talented Jennifer Hale, who does an amazing job giving her a dark, seductive, and alluring voice, which matched her personality. She also has a pretty cool design, sensual body language, and was just all around a pretty memorable mini-antagonist in the game. And while I still wouldn't necessarily consider regular Ophelia a goth, I can understand what they were trying to convey with her, and if all else, she was a pretty likable character, and I appreciate the writers for giving her an engaging likable personality. Come on, how could I not include Alice from Alice Madness Returns? She's probably one of the more notable Gothic characters, and she's also one of my all-time favorite lead female protagonists in video games. Her design's pretty solid, though I feel that her steam dress best captures the truly Gothic aesthetic, and unsurprisingly, it's my favorite look of hers in the game. The best thing about her design is definitely her long jet black hair that blows in the wind. I mean, talk about them hair physics, it's gorgeous. I really enjoyed her snarky, aloof, and sarcastic personality, and while it does come off a bit cliche, the writers made it work perfectly with Alice, especially when you take into account the circumstances that drove her to become the way she is. Though as you progress through her game, she goes through a bit of character growth, becoming much more sympathetic and caring to those closest to her. And I really liked that. All in all, Alice was a great character, and she was a good example of how to handle a female protagonist, and as far as Gothic characters go, she's definitely one of the best. Lulu is probably one of the characters that the average person thinks of when they think of Gothic characters in video games. And to be honest, I wasn't very sure if I wanted to include her on this list because I felt that the only thing she had going for her was fan service. But when I decided to look furthermore into her character background, I actually developed a deep appreciation and respect for her character. Lulu was a character from Final Fantasy X, who filled in as the Black Mage magic user for the team party. From the outside, it looks like she was nothing more than a fan service character for her, certain assets. But there was actually more to her character than that if you pay attention to the game's story. Her design was always one that I both loved and despised. From the waist up, it looks very nice with the beautiful fur trimming, the intricate lace detailing on her sleeves, and the beaded necklaces that matched her beautifully done darker styled makeup. But it all comes to a screeching halt when you get to the waist down and see those god-awful belts. I mean, what the hell was Tetsuya Nomura thinking with a design choice like that? It looks so fucking stupid, and it really detracted from her overall design. But thankfully, the character made up for it with a very nice presentation and an appealing personality. In the first half of the game, she came off a bit cold and distant, but very wise and intelligent, and as you progress further through the game's story, you get to see her caring and kind-hearted side, which I really liked, especially when you learn about her pretty sad past that made her who she is. I mean, she lost both her parents at 5 years old to Sin, the main antagonist of Final Fantasy X, lost her lover to Sin, and failed to protect her first summoner who ended up losing her life during their pilgrimage trial. And when you take all of this into account, it makes a lot of sense why she comes off a little reserved and guarded, but yet underneath all of it is a compassionate and kind heart. At the end of the day, when you actually pay attention to the story of the game, you can see that there's more to Lulu's character than just her appearance, and I really appreciated that about her character. And as far as Gothic characters go, Lulu was a pretty memorable one, and one who I have a lot of admiration for. Now I gotta admit that this list was very hard to make. However, before I reveal my number one choice, here are some honorable mentions. Jennifer.
No matter where we are, you gotta stop calling me Jennifer. You sound like my stepdad. It's Jen.
Jen was the leading protagonist from the game Primal that was released on the PlayStation 2 back in 2003. I've yet to play this game, but I kept hearing about how underrated it was. And when I decided to watch the gameplay and cutscenes to get a feel for her, I became an instant fan of her character. Her design may not be the most elaborately Gothic design, as it was pretty casual compared to some other Gothic characters out there, but I still rather enjoyed it, especially her dark makeup style and red and black color theme. But really, it's her personality that I absolutely loved about her character. I connected with this character so much that as I was watching the game's cutscenes, I literally felt like I was this character, as most of the things that she did when it came to interacting with other characters totally felt like something I would do myself. She really was that relatable to me. Well, minus being friends with the cool gargoyle. Her character was just brimming with personality and charisma, and while she could be snarky, cynical, and a tad hot-headed, she was also very caring and down to earth, and I really loved this personality combination as it gave her character more depth, and all of these traits made her such a standout protagonist that was very unforgettable. Well, for me anyway. Overall, Jen was a great example of a Gothic character, and she hit all the right notes for me. And for all these reasons, that is why Jen gets the #1 spot. And there you have it, folks. Those are my top 10 Gothic characters in video games. Let me know who some of your favorites are with a comment down below. And on that note, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please be sure to leave a like, share, and don't forget to subscribe for more gaming goodness. I'm Decadent Gamer, and I hope you have a great night. Thanks for watching.